Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, the team continues to do their due diligence on the quarterbacks coming up in this year's upcoming draft. We'll tell you all about that. Plus, it's official. We did our Locked On NFL podcast network. We did our mock draft on Thursday night. I'll let you know what I learned and what I did without exactly telling you what I did. Your calls and texts will close out the show. It's all coming up on a very busy Friday, April 7th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts and get the latest edition of the show as soon as it's available. If you're checking us out on YouTube, we definitely appreciate that. And we definitely got to shout out my man, Ari. You're checking us out because Ari has grown this thing from absolutely nothing to over 5,000 subscribers. So we definitely appreciate Ari in a major way. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. But let's go ahead and get into today's show as we close out this week really strong, and lots of news and notes to get to. Plus, want to give you some details and some thoughts on the Locked On NFL mock draft that we did on Thursday nights. But first, the news and notes is just about the quarterback position. And the Raiders continue to do their due diligence on the quarterbacks. Albert Breer from Monday Morning Quarterback on that side tell you all the time that if you're going to listen to somebody who is one of the insiders in the NFL, make sure you listen to him. He's got a direct beeline with Dave Ziegler, the GM of the Raiders, and head coach Josh McDaniels, so he knows what he's talking about when he says that, it's kind of off the top of his head or this is what he's hearing. Yeah, it's what he's hearing because he's hearing it from them, right? So I'm not saying that everything is 100% truth, but a lot of truth is in what Albert Breer is talking about. So this is just a little nugget on top 30 visits, and it shouldn't be surprising. Talked about it on Thursday as Alabama's Bryce Young went to the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center and had one of his top 30 visits there. Obviously, early in the week, Will Levis from Kentucky on Monday, as a matter of fact, he had his top 30 visit. And I mentioned that Anthony Richardson would be in today. That's happening. And I figured that C.J. Stroud at some point was going to visit. Well, Albert Breer pointed out that C.J. Stroud and Tennessee's Hendon Hooker will be in town next week. So they're doing their due diligence with everyone. Again, Will Levis on Monday, Bryce Young on Thursday, Anthony Richardson today, C.J. Stroud and Hendon Hooker next week. Those are the top 5 quarterbacks. And, of course, they've been doing their due diligence on other quarterbacks as well. Plus, they still have their local day, which really, because they're in Las Vegas, gives them a big-time opportunity where they can stretch out as far as like UCLA and USC. Guys that are there, they can have in for top 30 visits without them counting against their top 30 visits. And then, of course, like UNLV and other schools in the area, UNR, which is Reno, Nevada, Reno, they can do that as well. So they have a pretty good little local area. And I say local in air quotes because it's not really local, but it's close enough. So that's also another element that they get to use to their disposal and as they lead up to the NFL draft. So there you go. Anthony Richardson in today, C.J. Stroud and Hendon Hooker in next week. Also wanted to get into a few more sound bites from Todd McShay on his pre-draft conference call that I was on just a couple days ago. Really have gone through a lot of the sound already, but just had a couple more that I wanted to bring to the table. And the first one is about the quarterback position. I believe C.J. Stroud's going to go number 1 to the Carolina Panthers, and Bryce Young is going to go number 2 to the Houston Texans. And it could be that order. It could be 1-2 just like that, or it could be Bryce Young 1 and C.J. Stroud number 2. Matter of fact, Chris Mortensen from ESPN actually reported on Thursday that he's hearing that it's Bryce Young going to be the number 1 quarterback overall taken by the Carolina Panthers. And, of course, I'm trying to do my due diligence and my research to find out if there's truth to that or not. But that's what he's hearing. So, really, it could be either way. C.J. Stroud 1, Bryce Young 2, Bryce Young 1, C.J. Stroud number 2. Here is Todd McShay talking about C.J. Stroud. Is he the best pick or is he the safest pick? Because there's a difference. Here's Todd McShay.
I think Bryce Young is the best pick. I think Stroud is probably the safer pick. And I'm not worried about the height for Bryce Young in terms of seeing the field and being able to locate receivers and all of that. He has proven, like Drew Brees and several others, that he can maneuver in the pocket and he can locate receivers down the field. He has no trouble seeing over offensive linemen and all that stuff. It's just about his durability. And he had the shoulder this year, which kind of, they shut him down in practice for a few weeks and limited his throwing to try to help him, recuperate. But other than that, he stayed healthy as a 2-year starter at Alabama. But you project to a 17-game season in the NFL with those defensive linemen and trying, doing their, and I know their quarterbacks are protected now, but they're still taking a beating. You look at Tua Tagovailoa this past year and kind of getting ragdolled and thrown around. You worry about that a little bit, but Tua doesn't have the mobility and the pocket presence and the feel for pressure, and even the mobility, like the escapability that Bryce Young does. Herbstreit and I've talked about it, and Herbstreit's the one who brought it up, and I couldn't agree more. Like, I think watching Bryce Young is like watching Steph Curry in a basketball game. The size just doesn't matter because they're so different. Everything is so slow, and the way they process things so quickly and see the whole field or the whole court is so similar. And with Bryce, you get a player that can extend plays and can create magic inside and outside the pocket. He had the highest QBR of all these quarterbacks outside the pocket because of his ability to feel pressure, where it's coming from, know when to bail, know which side to bail to, know how much time he has, and the willingness and the toughness to wait to the last second, and he'll take the hit or he'll duck out of the hit right after he makes the throw, but to know exactly when it's the perfect timing and when he has to bail on the play versus when he can hang in there and allow a receiver to get open. And you see so many of his great plays, it's like right before the defender's going to reach him, he maximized the amount of time that he could for the receiver to go get open, I should say. And then all of a sudden the ball's out in flash and it's spotted perfectly on the receiver. So you get that with Bryce. Now, what CJ does better, it's slightly better than Bryce. And, there's a somewhat noticeable difference. He has a stronger arm, and inside the pocket, he's as good as there is in this class and the last couple of classes in terms of just processing quickly, getting the ball out with anticipation, and being able to layer throws on all three levels with exceptional ball placement. I mean, you've got CJ is the best pure pocket passer with a bigger build. So on paper, he's built to last longer in the NFL versus CJ, who can extend and create and has this presence and field vision like no other in this class. But the only thing I'm worried about with Bryce is, can he hold up? That really is it. I mean, if he was 6'2", 220 pounds, there would be no conversation. Bryce Young would clearly be the number one quarterback in this class.
So there you go. Todd McShay talking about C.J. Stroud. He feels like he is the safer pick. Bryce Young, the better pick. And I agree. I agree 100%. I think Bryce Young is the better player. I believe that Bryce Young is the guy that has the it factor, where C.J. Stroud has great anticipation. He has great accuracy. He's going to win from the pocket a lot. He has the mobility to get out of the pocket if he needs to, but he doesn't prefer to. But I do think that Bryce Young just has a little bit of that it factor, and that'll go a long way. Of course, the big question about him is durability, and that's why Todd McShay says that C.J. Stroud is the safer pick. So I thought that was pretty interesting, him kind of just comparing and contrasting the two guys. And the final soundbite that I have for you when it comes to Todd McShay and what he had to say on his pre-draft conference call happens to do with the other side of the ball, which is the defense. Talking about Georgia offensive or outside linebacker, or edge rusher, Nolan Smith, whatever you really want to call him, depending on what scheme he's going to be in. So that was actually the question that was posed to Todd McShay. What scheme does he think fits best for him? What is his actual position? And what type of player does he think that he'll develop into? Here's Todd McShay talking all things Georgia edge, Nolan Smith.
Nolan Smith is interesting because I think he's a 3-4 edge, but I also think in some schemes he may be like an off-the-ball linebacker that an obvious passing downs you're turning loose off the edge. He's unique in that way. So I look at it and I just think, but with Nolan Smith, you're getting obviously the freakish athletic ability. The speed that he brings is just so unique. What did he run? What was it? I'll look at it. I think he ran the 4.3s at 238 pounds. He's 6'2", 238, and he ran a 4.39 in the 40 with 41.5-inch vertical. And you see on tape, like, I know he's only 238, but man, he plays tough, and he mixes it up with bigger blockers, bigger backs. He's not just one of those track guys, speed guys off the edge. he's a physical run defender who's going to make you work for everything you got. And then he can explode off the edge. I think he's got to work on his counter moves and kind of working through contact as a pass rusher. But he is an alpha dog, and he's the type of guy you come in like in a year or two, he's going to be the quarterback of the defense. He's going to be the leader of that group, and he just loves the game. So players like that, you feel good about. I know he's coming off the pec injury, and it was a setback this year, but it shouldn't be a long-term issue. And as he continues to get bigger and stronger, working as a full-time job in the NFL, I think he's going to become a really, really good every down player and also a leader on defense in the NFL.
So Nolan Smith is a guy that I really like a lot. I mean, he's a guy that had a lot of great things to say at the combine and really caught everyone's attention. I mean, he just captured the room just from him talking. And you heard Todd McShay at the end talk about he's going to end up being the leader of somebody's defense. He's going to be that alpha dog. And that's what I talk about all the time is you got to have alpha dogs. And the Raiders have one on defense. His name is Max Crosby. They need more. That's something that I've been pounding in the ground. I mean, it's for anyone who will listen. I keep saying they've got to get a difference maker. They've got to get a difference maker. They've got to get a difference maker. No matter what they do in this draft, they have 12 picks right now. They've got to come out with a couple difference makers, a couple alpha dogs that can really take control of the defensive side of things. They have alpha dogs on the offensive side of things. I would say Josh Jacobs is an alpha, of course. Devontae Adams, we know he's an alpha, right? They have opportunities to get alphas. And look, they can go draft a guy that could develop into an alpha dog at some point, depending on who that is. But they just have a lack of those difference makers on the defensive side of things. Nolan Smith is a guy that I'm very intrigued by. He wouldn't be a guy that you pick at number 7, but he is a guy I could see the Raiders or any other team picking in the teens, right? If the Raiders were to trade back from 7 to, 12, 13, maybe that's the best player available, and you go ahead and pull the trigger. But Nolan Smith, I think, is going to be a really good player for whatever team decides to pull the trigger on him. And my final little note here for segment number 1, today's Locked On Raiders podcast news and notes of the day. I just wanted to give a shout out to my guy, James Arcelana. We started the Black Hole Banter podcast together. He's put out a Raiders specific draft guide. He does it every single year. It's got 80 players profiled, 9 position groups, pros, cons, thoughts on the fits with the Raiders. It is all things silver and black. So it's 100% focused on all these players, all 80 of them, how they would fit with the Raiders. So something intriguing that, Raider fans would love to have, and I've had multiple copies of it over the years. He does a really good job. Check him out on Twitter, at Oakland Above All. That's his Twitter handle. You can find out how to get it. It's only $5. You can also email him, blackholebanter@gmail.com, if you want to get the information. Again, it's only $5. 80 players profiled, 9 different position groups. He gives the pros, cons, and thoughts on the fit with the silver and black, puts a lot of work into it, and does a really, really good job. So shout out to my guy, James Arcelana. As I said, we started the Black Hole Banter podcast together, and it's obviously grown in a major way and developed into the Locked On Raiders podcast. So I definitely always appreciate him. Coming up in segment number 2, I kind of wanted to go over the Locked On NFL mock draft that we had Thursday night on the network and tell you what I did without exactly telling you what I did, if you know what I mean. That's all coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, and we'll get to that after I tell you about the Ultimate Football GM. And it feels like all off season long, we're playing the Ultimate Football GM, right? I mean, that's what we're basically doing, because this game is exactly what we're doing. We're being Dave Ziegler. We're hiring coaches. We're bringing in free agents. We're preparing a draft board, getting ready for an upcoming season, going to navigate through the highs and lows of a season, trying to get the ultimate goal, which is the championship. That is exactly what this game is. You're responsible for everything. It's challenging. It's a realistic game. It's completely free. It's playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. All listeners of the Locked On Raiders podcast get 100% free boost to their franchise if they use the promo code Locked On. It's all in caps and it's in the game store. That's Locked On, all in caps. Make sure to check it out today. If you want to download the game, all you got to do is visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. Again, that's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into the details on our Locked On mock draft that we have. We do it every single year on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's always a lot of fun depending on, where the Raiders are selecting, how many picks. I mean, back in 2019 when they had 3 first-round picks, that was a whole lot of fun. I hit on Josh Jacobs, and that was it. Right? I think I selected Devin White, Josh Jacobs, and I can't remember who else I selected, but Josh Jacobs I got right, didn't get the other 2 right. So, it's always a crapshoot. You never really know exactly how the board is going to fall, what these teams are going to do, and what the people who host the shows, the respective shows, what they're thinking as far as what their team should do. So all I have in my head is what I've been pounding in the table, right? I've been pounding so many times saying, hey, they've got to come away with a difference maker. And so the thing about it is, and I'm not going to go ahead and go through all the different selections that happened before the Raiders and after the Raiders because, I want you to be able to listen to the show and actually enjoy it. But I can give you some details on what I really learned about it. And it's intriguing because I realized as it became my turn that, one, there's going to be a lot of really good players available when the Raiders pick at 7. And as many people have pointed out, trade back. And one of the things I'm afraid of when it comes to trading back is trading back too far where they don't get a difference maker. That's what I really think that they need is difference makers. I said it in segment number 1. I've said it on many different shows. I'm going to say it again. They need to get a difference maker. They need to get an alpha dog. Is that going to be a quarterback? Is that going to be a defensive player? Who knows? It's really up to them what they want to do in round 1. But it was interesting to me because we've had these conversations on the podcast, especially when it comes to Anthony Richardson after his pro day last week. And it's just been, like I said, that little Anthony Richardson on my shoulder saying, trade up, trade up, trade up. So pick number 3 came. Alex Clancy, hosts Locked On Arizona Cardinals, and he sent me a text message. Hey, Q, you want to trade up from 7 to number 3? Anthony Richardson's available. Do you want to go trade up and go get him? And, man, it took everything in my power. It took everything in my power for me to say no. I said, no, it's okay. I'll stay there at number 7. So he got kind of upset because he wanted me to trade with him. But after the information that I heard from Todd McShay, as I played it on the podcast, where he said that the Raiders really aren't interested in trading up to the number 3 spot unless it's C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. And I'll just tell you, no spoiler alert, but those 2 guys were gone. And I don't think that should be a surprise. That's probably the least big surprise that's going to happen in the draft come April 27th is that Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud will be gone 1, 2. And it doesn't really matter what the order is. At 3, there was an opportunity for me to trade up, but I did not do that. So Alex never got a trade partner, so he stayed there at number 3 and picked the first defensive player, and that was Will Anderson. Now, I'm not going to tell you any more of the guys that were selected by any of the other hosts, including myself, but what I will say and what I learned is, 1, there's always going to be a pick, even in the top 10, that makes you scratch your head and say, wait, what? Because there was, and I'll tell you who made the pick, but I won't tell you what their pick was. At number 6, with the Detroit Lions, the host of that show picked a guy that I would never have guessed he would have picked. Never would have guessed it. And I'll tell you right now, not a guy that I thought was going to be in the top 10 at all. But it was funny because the different hosts, we were all talking about it, and I was like, there's no way that's too high for that guy. And somebody chimed in, and I don't remember who it was. He said, this reminds me of Cleveland Ferrell. This reminds me of Cleveland Ferrell. No way he was supposed to go number 4 overall, and the Raiders picked him. And so then all of a sudden I realized, yeah, you know what? There's always that pick in the top 10 where someone just reaches out and makes a move for someone that they really had no business picking right there. They could have got it at a later time. So the host from the Lions at number 6 made a pick that just blew my mind. And then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, now the heat's on me because I've got multiple guys that I could select here at number 7 and feel very good about the move. Feel like the Raiders got better in a major way. And there's so many different directions I could have gone. I could have gone quarterback. I could have gone defensive tackle. I could have gone cornerback. I could have gone offensive lineman. There were so many different directions I could have gone sitting there at number 7. And so I thought I would be, I was feeling a little froggy. So I thought I'd leap. I said, you know what? Anyone interested in this number 7 overall pick? Because, a lot of people, as I mentioned, have hit me up and said, Q, trade back, collect more picks. Remember, the Raiders had 12 picks going into this draft. So I thought, well, I'll throw it out there. I'll throw the bait out there into the water, see if I can catch a fish. So I did. Hey, man, anyone want this number 7 overall pick? So it was funny. One guy, the host of the Eagles show, said, well, what do you want for it? And I said, nah, man, you tell me what what you got, right? Don't put it on me. You tell me what you got, and we'll decide if we're going to make a move or not. So he said, okay, I got you. How about this? I give you the number 10 overall pick. We swap spots. I'll go to 7. You go to 10. I'll give you number 62, which is in the back end of round 2. And I'll give you a 2024 4th-round pick. So now I'm adding an extra pick for the Raiders, which gives them 6 picks in the top 105, and then, or 109, I should say. And then I'm also getting an extra pick in the 4th round of the next draft. So I said, well, where I'm at, I looked at the board and I said, okay, from everyone that's been selected, where I'm at right now, if I miss out on every guy that I'm looking at the top of my head right now, sitting at number 10, there's still some really good players there. So I pulled the trigger. I pulled the trigger on that. So I traded back to number 10. I picked up pick number 62 and a 2024 fourth round pick, which if you look at the draft chart, that was really right on par with what the value was. So it was actually really good value. I only moved back a couple spots, and I still was able to get my number one guy. And it's funny, I really blew it because sitting at number 10, the Tennessee Titans were sitting there at 11. And if I hadn't really, I think I talked up my selection a little bit too much without saying that this was my selection. So at number 11, the host of the Titans show, he kind of had a feeling where I was going. So he decided to stay there, but he was about to hit me up. I mean, he even hit me and was like, man, I was just about to trade up with you, but then I thought that was going to be your selection. So I probably could have traded back to the number 11 spot, which is only one more spot, but I could have collected another pick. So ultimately the Raiders end up with 13 picks just based off what I did in round one. End up with 13 total picks and 6 in the top 109. And also I'm adding more capital into the 2024 draft. And I still was able to get a difference maker player, a player that I'm very high on. And again, there were so many different directions I could have gone. Even at number 10, quarterback was still available. Defensive line was still available. Defensive tackle was still available. Like I said, edge rusher was available. The wide receivers, but I know the Raiders don't need wide receivers, so that wasn't going to be where I go. Cornerback was still available. I mean, there was all options were still on the table. And really, I thought for a minute, because I'm so high on Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State, the guy who had 14 career interceptions, including 6 pick sixes, I thought, man, I wonder if I can continue to trade back enough to get there. Right, to get to that sweet spot where I think Emmanuel Forbes would go around 24 or 25. But like I've said so many times, I don't want to trade myself out of an alpha dog. But Emmanuel Forbes, I think, is a really good player, and I would really love to see the Raiders come down, be able to get him. I think he would be a great addition to that Raiders secondary. And yeah, he's gonna get burned a few times. I did a pretty good deep dive on him on my radio show on Thursday. We're talking to someone who covered Mississippi State like a glove, and he said, yeah, he's gonna get burned every once in a while. It's part of him maturing. But he's so good at anticipating where the ball goes, and his film study helps him learn about different formations and how to go get the ball. And again, when you have 14 career interceptions, including 6 pick sixes, you'll take that, right? I'll take that. And it kind of reminds me of Trayvon Diggs with the Cowboys. He came in and immediately was able to create turnovers, but there was times that he'd get burned, and it was kind of like that frustration moment, like, okay, he's really good, but then he gets burned at times. And then all of a sudden he got a lot better. And if you go back and look at what Trayvon Diggs did a season ago, he was a lot better, and he wasn't getting burned consistently like he was doing his rookie year, even the second year in the league. So he improved a lot, and he still has the playmaker ability. So that's who Emmanuel Forbes is. That's a guy that I definitely think about. Matter of fact, but I had to get off the mock draft early. I had to hang up because I had to head to the house. I almost hung around long enough to try to trade up from the second round to the back end of the first round to go pick him up. But then I said, you know what? Let me just leave it alone. I've already collected an extra pick. I already have another one in round 2, which is going to come in very handy. And you give Dave Ziegler 13 opportunities at it, I think he's going to get it right. But I'll tell you right now, Raider Nation, without telling you exactly who I selected, I got a really good player at number 10, picked up an extra pick at 62, and picked up another pick in 2024. So I thought I did really well. There was a couple people that questioned the pick. They didn't like it, but I was okay with it. I thought it was a great pick, and I think that you'll probably enjoy it as well. Like I said, I'm not going to tell you who I picked. I'm not going to tell you who everyone else picked, but like I said, I thought I did a really good job when it came to that selection. And when they do drop that podcast, that little series like we do each and every year, I'll definitely let you know about it so you can hear it, and then you can let me know what you think about my selection. What would you have done? At number 7, would you made a selection? Would you trade back to number 10? Are you okay with the value that I got out of it? An extra second-round pick this year and a 2024 fourth-round pick? Again, that was right on par with the value when you look at the trade chart. So I was right on with that. I could have tried to gouge him a little bit more, but I didn't want to be greedy, right? I didn't want to blow the trade and him say, okay, never mind. I wanted to get that extra second-round pick, and I thought I did a good job with that. So let me know what you think. 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. We'll get to your calls and texts after I tell you about FanDuel. And don't know if you were checking out the Suns and the Nuggets on Thursday night, but what a really good game, right? If that's a preview of the playoffs, I'm all about it because the playoffs are just about here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and it's super easy to use. Then you can bet on anything from the money line, points scored, threes knocked down in the game, anything you can imagine, they've got. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. Don't miss a chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn about more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Highlight Hendo. He's calling to talk about the draft, the moves they have made this offseason, and believes there's some good strategy behind what the Raiders are doing. Here he is, Highlight Hendo.
Yo, what's up, Q? It's Highlight Hendo here out in the 916. I just wanted to call and say how stoked I am about this season, about the draft. Vic Tafer, I just seen a little thing he put out on Twitter saying that the Raiders have downgraded at every position so far. And I mean, I totally disagree. I know there's not a lot of excitement about all the players that they've signed recently, but I think there's a real strategic move behind everything that they're doing. And I think a lot of people have been talking about how it frees them up with that first pick, and with all their picks, really, it's like they get to, I know you were saying they get to pick with the best player available at need. And I really think that's where they're going. And I think they're setting themselves up for success to kind of maybe make a sneaky run with a good amount of wins. You know what I mean? It's Jimmy G and Brian Hoyer. They're experienced, you know, and it doesn't matter if we draft somebody because the offense is stacked. And if we can get a little bit more going on the defense, I think that's worth competing with the Patrick Mahomes and the Justin Herberts and the Denver Broncos over there. It's really not about making a team to beat one specific other team. I think Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels are making a team that's cohesive, and they're bringing all these familiar players so that they can kind of hit the ground running and already have something set in motion and kind of pick up where they left off in a sense. So yeah, like I said, I'm just really excited to see what's going to happen, and I'm excited to see the Raiders put all the haters to bed. You know what I mean? Just win, baby. Let's go. Love you, Q. Great show, man.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And yeah, I agree with the moves that they're making. They're very strategic. I'm not saying that they're going to all work, but they're very strategic. It's not like they're just going ahead and signing guys and throwing something against the wall and hoping it sticks. I mean, they are definitely trying to provide some competition. They're trying to provide some depth. They're trying to build the defense through the draft. There's no doubt about that. So for anyone who's upset that, well, they haven't addressed the defense, they're spending all this money on offense and haven't done anything with the defense, it's coming, right? I mean, let the draft play out and you'll see that they're going to get a great handful of defensive players. Now, again, they've got to select the right guys. That's on them. And, of course, the guys that they have in camp and on the roster right now, they've got to be able to take to camp and develop them. I mean, that's on them. I'm not guaranteeing that what they're doing is going to work, but you can see that there's some strategy. There's a plan behind what they're doing, and it's starting to really show, you know, how Dave Ziegler is thinking, how Champ Kelly is thinking, what Josh McDaniels is thinking. Again, I'm not guaranteeing that it's work. I'm not trying to vouch for anyone or co-sign and say, yes, this is the way it's going to work. I promise you. There's nobody will know that until we see it play out on the field. But I do understand what they're doing. I can definitely agree with that. Thank you so much for the call, Highlight. It's good to hear from you. I appreciate you. Next up, got a text from Scott from the 469. He said, Q, you mentioned guys Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow. Those guys are both seen as can't miss or generational type prospects. There's always lesser touted guys that end up being great, but there are a lot more highly ranked guys that just don't pan out in the league. People keep talking about going after the highly rated quarterbacks in this draft, but that is relative. The general consensus is that this is a down quarterback year. There are just the best available. Some of these guys would be second-day picks in previous drafts. If a guy slips a bit, you can get some great value on a pick. Great. But don't go chasing guys on the hope that they might surprise some people. Take the known quantity at the positions of serious need. There is a winning, not great, let's not get confused, quarterback in Jimmy G. Roll with that guy and address the major deficiencies on defense, as there is far more room for improvement on that side of the ball, which translates to greater overall improvement for the team. If you want to go big on drafting a quarterback, look to next year when the prospects are generally recognized as being better. That's Scott from the 469. And thanks for the text. I appreciate you. And I don't disagree with you. I just think it's a good discussion to have, right? I mean, what do you do if you feel very high about a quarterback, and clearly the Raiders did because they tried to trade up to number 1. That's something that we can all agree on, something that we all know is true. They tried to trade up to number 1, so they obviously saw a quarterback or two that they were very high on. I believe that's C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. So if one of those guys becomes available at number 3, they might make a move for him because they believe that could be that generational guy. Now, I'm not in the belief that one of those guys will be available at number 3. But as I learned in the Locked On draft that we did, the mock draft we did on Thursday night, crazy things happen. People pick players that you just think like, no, there's no reason for them to be there, but they are. And so all of a sudden I might look up and maybe Anthony Richardson, maybe Carolina decides Anthony Richardson's their guy and they take him at number 1. Then all of a sudden Stroud or Young is going to be there at 3. Then maybe the Raiders pick up the phone and call Arizona and say, hey, what's it going to take to get it done? And honestly, I'll tell you this. I believe they already know what it's going to take to get it done. I believe they've already had those discussions, as they should. You know, unlike what the Packers are doing with, or not the Packers, what the Jets are doing with the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, they already know the compensation. I fully believe that the Raiders already know what the Cardinals want and the Cardinals know what the Raiders are willing to give up for that number 3 overall spot. And if one of those guys happens to be available at number 3, I wouldn't be shocked to see the Raiders go up and get him. But if it's not Stroud, if it's not Young, I definitely believe they'll do the same thing that you said and just sit there, wait for their player to come to them as far as a defensive player, get the best one available, maybe even trade back like I did in our mock draft. And I did. I traded back to number 10, picked up an extra second-round pick this year, and, you know, kept it moving and still got a great player. So, I mean, that's the thing about it. There's so many different things that they can do. They're in a really good position at spot number 7, and plus having 12 draft picks in this upcoming draft is really, really good draft capital. So I think that they can, if they do the right thing and hit on the right players, they can really turn the team around as far as the roster makeup, the way it looks, and the talent that they have, or the void of talent that they have on the team right now. So thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a call from Blue Collar Raider. He's calling to ask about Emmanuel Forbes if he happens to not be a first-round pick. Here's Blue Collar Raider from the 408.
Hey, this is your Blue Collar Raider calling out of the 408. Just got done listening to your Todd McShay edition episode. And from what I hear, if Emmanuel Forbes dropped down to the 2nd round, would you double up? Would you agree to get a Witherspoon in the 1st round and then a Forbes in the 2nd? What do you think? What do you think? Let me know. Blue Collar Raider out.
Short but sweet call from Blue Collar Raider in the 408. Thank you for the call. And my simple answer, yes and yes. I would no doubt grab him if available, right? I would have no problem doubling up. If Dave Ziegler, and matter of fact, I know Dave Ziegler would have no problem doubling up. Just think and look back what he did last year, right? I mean, he got 2 offensive linemen in Thayer Munford in the 7th round and Dylan Parham in the 3rd round. He got 2 defensive tackles, Matt Butler and Neil Farrell Jr. He got 2 running backs in Zamir White and Britton Brown. I mean, he did it like it was Noah's Ark, 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. So, yeah, I mean, I would have no problem with him doubling up at the corner position, especially 2 corners that are difference makers. And I sure would have no problem with that. And I know that they still need to address the interior, and there's, you know, you can get some linebacker help. But, again, 12 draft picks is what they have right now. You can get multiple guys in multiple rounds. So, yeah, I would be fine with that and would not be shocked to see Dave Ziegler go and get multiples of certain positions, maybe a couple positions, just like he did a year ago. That's kind of his MO. It's kind of what he does. Thank you for that call, my man. I appreciate you. It's great to hear from you. Next up, text from Raider Eddie. Hey, Q, what's up? Can you talk a little about our edge position? Some in the nation see Chandler as a starter. I don't, because I don't think we can afford to have a guy on the other side of Max no-show for 3/4 of the season. Why haven't we seen development from guys like Kuntz and Bowers? They played Farrell a lot last year, and they seem uninterested in keeping him around during free agency. I know it's tempting to say we have Chandler Jones opposite Max and we're fine, but I still remember the majority of the games last season with no impact from him. Am I being too critical of Jones or our lack of strategy? That's from Raider Eddie, and thank you for the text. And no, you're not wrong. I don't think he should be a starter either. I think the only reason he's still on the team this upcoming year is because of his salary. I don't think that what he gave the Raiders in 2022 is worth it. 4.5 sacks and the one big monster play that he had when Jacoby Myers threw the ball back and he picked it off and took it to the house and big face Mac Jones. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't worth – the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. They paid him way too much money, but they're on the hook this year. So he's going to be a Raider this year, but I think that he'd be better in a rotational situation. I would have no problem if the Raiders at 7, if Tyree Wilson was there, go get Tyree Wilson, right? A guy that can play opposite of Max, a guy who could kick inside and play with Max and Chandler. I think that there's a lot of room for growth and a lot of room for development. And not to mention, I still think that it would be good to get an edge rusher so you can give Max Crosby a few snaps off, right? The guy played just about every snap, right? And I mean, at the end of the game, he was worn out, and they're focusing in. And when I say they, I mean opposing teams are focusing in on trying to slow down 98. So someone else has to step up. So, no, I'm with you. I think that the edge position definitely needs to be addressed. Farrell, he played really, he kind of kicked inside more often than not in 2022. Now he's in San Francisco. Bowers, he played a lot in the preseason, never got really some burn in the regular season. I'm not too sure why. Malcolm Kuntz seems like he kind of fell out of favors with the Raiders staff and Josh McDaniels. So I thought he was a guy that was going to get some burn and actually develop a little bit more than he did his rookie year. But he kind of looked like he took a step back. So I'm not 100% sure what they're doing with Kuntz, not 100% sure what they're doing with Bauer. I believe Bowers is a free agent, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he's a free agent anyway. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, man, Malcolm Kuntz is still on the roster and really doesn't seem like he's getting any more burn than he did his rookie year. And really, his rookie year, he had some pretty good success. I think 3 sacks in limited amount of snaps. So I thought he was really going to take a step forward the next year, but that is something that he did not do. But thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. We'll close this out with a call from Big Nick in Cali. Remember, he's a Steeler fan. He's calling as a Steeler fan, and he wants to talk about the upcoming draft for the Raiders and what he thinks that they're going to do. Here he is, Big Nick in Cali.
How you doing, Q? Big Nick from California, Steeler fan. Just wanted to chime in, man, and tell you something that about this year's draft, man, that I'm pretty confident in you guys in. A lot of people say the 1974 draft for the Steelers would never be accomplished again, which meaning 5 future Hall of Famers coming out of the same draft class. Lynn Swann, Jack Lambert, John Stallworth, Mike Webster, and Donnie Shell. You guys have 12 picks, and you guys need a lot of defensive help, but you guys have 12 picks in a draft class that's very, very, very talented. So I'm predicting, man, if you guys don't hit that 5 mark, I believe you guys can come pretty damn close. Honestly, man, and I'm honestly seeing that number 7 pick being the first one. But this is going to be a very exciting draft. I can't wait to see it for my Steelers, also for the Raiders. I can't wait to see who we pick up. It's going to be very exciting. But yeah, man, I think this could be the year that mark is reached, and I believe you guys could be the team to do it. Thanks for taking my call. Have a good day. Keep up the good work.
Big Nick, thanks for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And that's a big task that you're talking about, hitting on 5 Hall of Famers. I mean, it's hard to hit on 1 HOF or let alone 5, right? But I'll say this, if they can get 4 or 5 starters with one of those like 1 to 2 of those guys being alphas, I'd be happy about that, right? I mean, again, and you mentioned having 12 picks, you got 12 cracks at it, and have an opportunity to trade back a couple times and get some extra picks as well, kind of navigate your way through the board. Yeah, I think that they really could turn this roster over and add a whole lot of talent, especially on the defensive side of things, but you got to have the right guys in play. You've got to have the right guys, but I like the way that you're thinking. I love the positivity coming from you, even as a Steeler fan, man. I think that's awesome. I definitely appreciate hearing from you on the show, and got some good insight there and some good football knowledge, and it's great to have some good football conversation here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. As a matter of fact, going to go ahead and drop the mic on that note. Going to wrap up today's show. I got a text from Southern Indiana Raider I'll get to on Monday. Call from Jordan in Oregon. We'll get to his call on Monday as well. Plus whatever comes out of the weekend, some news and notes. Got a lot to get to, and the days are just counting down to Kansas City. April 27th, that's the first round. I'll definitely be there. Excited about that opportunity to be at another draft and see how the Raiders start to put this team together by way of the NFL draft. Again, that'll come up April 27th. For me, I'm going to be very busy today. Coming up this morning, depending on what time you're listening to this show, I'll be on ESPN Radio from 9 a.m. to noon Pacific time, filling in for Fitz and Harry. So I'll be able to do that show, and then I got to run to the radio station and do my local show from 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. So 9 a.m. to noon, and then 2 to 5 all Pacific time for me, ESPN Radio, and then Raider Nation Radio 920 as well. I have Charles Davis on from the NFL Network talking all things NFL draft. We'll have him on on Raider Nation Radio 920, and Herm Edwards is going to join us on ESPN. One of the guests we'll have on ESPN. So going to have a fun day today. Hopefully you enjoyed this show, and hopefully you enjoy your weekend. It's Good Friday, so I know a lot of people are off. So enjoy your time off. Enjoy your Easter, the whole Easter weekend. Remember, the reason for the Easter is not just going out and chasing the bunny in the yard and going and getting candy and all that good stuff. I mean, there's a reason for the season, and so we definitely want to remember that. So be safe this weekend. Again, have fun with your family and get a little R&R this Easter weekend. And if you're off today on Good Friday, enjoy that time as well. But be safe out there. Definitely appreciate you as always. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.